welcome everybody. This is Gabriel Fernandez Borsot. I'm a member of the Alef Trust faculty, and I'm the leader of the module of Transpersonal Psychology for our MSc program. And this webinar is part of the module in the second year of the program. But at Alef Trust, we have decided to open it to our wider community of students. This is the first guest webinar this year, and we will have another one in 2 weeks with Dr. Paul Cunningham, and a third one right after Christmas, the Christmas break with Christine Brooks. You will receive timely reminders from our community coordinator, Francesca Hector, and you may also check regularly the activity in Sutra, our community platform. Next, I will introduce our guest speaker today, Dr. Jorge Ferrer, but first let me explain how we're going to organize the webinar. Dr. Ferrer will give first a lecture of approximately 45 minutes, in which he will summarize the main features of the participatory approach, of which he is the seminal thinker. After that, we will have 45 minutes for questions and answers, in which you all will be invited to participate. I will moderate and organize the Q&A phase, and you will be able to post your questions in the chat or open your mic and directly ask Jorge. Before introducing him, I want to express my gratitude for his generosity in accepting our invitation to participate in this event and for the time he has devoted to prepare today's webinar. So who's our guest speaker today? Jorge Ferrer obtained a degree in clinical psychology at the University of Barcelona and the University of Wales College of Cardiff. He carried out doctoral research on mindfulness meditation, and he obtained a scholarship to complete his PhD at the California Institute for Integral Studies in San Francisco, USA. He began teaching in 1998 at CIIS, the California Institute of Integral Studies, and also at the Institute of Transpersonal Psychology, now Sophia University. And in the year 2000, he became core faculty at CIIS, where he was a professor for more than 20 years, and also served for many years as chair of the Department of East-West Psychology. He's the seminal thinker of the application of a participatory perspective to transpersonal theory, and his ideas contributed to advance the field significantly. His 2002 groundbreaking book, Revisioning Transpersonal Theory, A Participatory Vision of Human Spirituality, along with dozens of other insightful articles and books, have been an important catalyst of the second wave of transpersonal psychology. In 2007, he co-edited the participatory turn, Spirituality, Mysticism, Religious Studies, a collective intellectual tapestry which revealed a participatory movement inside and outside the transpersonal field. And in 2017, he published Participation and the Mystery, Transpersonal Essays in Psychology, Education, and Religion, a work of maturity which showed the robustness and that the participatory approach has achieved as a transpersonal perspective with application to many aspects and fields. Beyond transpersonal studies, during the last years, he has published 2 books on the topic of alternative intimate relationships. He was a leading scholar on transformative practices and integral epistemology at the Excellence Center for Theory and Research, California, where he has also offered various talks and workshops. In the year 2000, his work received the Fetzer Institute's Presidential Award for its seminal contribution to consciousness studies. And in 2009, he was selected to become an advisor to the organization Religions for Peace at the United Nations on a research project aimed at solving global interreligious conflict. In the last years, he has focused on his private practice, assisting individuals, couples, and groups in their psycho-spiritual development. So thank you very much, Jorge, for your webinar today, and we're all yours.
Thank you very much, Gabi, and for this fulsome and generous introduction. I know this is an English-British degree without a formality, but please call me Jorge, not Dr. Ferrer. I would feel much more comfortable with that. And I would like to begin just with a few minutes of centering meditations. So I invite you to close your eyes, get a comfortable position, and simply pay attention to the breath as it expands your chest and opening your heart, as well as it expands your lower belly and expanding, also opening your vital center. And whenever you exhale at your own pace, you have your feet on the ground or any other part of your body, I invite you to let go, to release anything that doesn't belong to this moment, to be as fully present as we can be all together in this special time, not only mentally, intellectually, but also in our bodies, in our vital energy, in our heart, and in our kind of consciousness, witness, awareness. Simply invite you especially to realize as we become aware of the breath, how easy it is that we are becoming a bit more present in the body, more fully embodied, and all what it contains. And in particular, I invite you to feel the body right now as it is, simply embracing what you find there and even the sensation. And also attention to the vital core, that area, the hara, between your belly button and your genital area, and the site of your vitality, sexuality, deep creativity, and also a channel for the instinctive wisdom of life. And also, as you continue breathing, I invite you to bring up your attention to your chest, to your heart, and also simply as a gentle invitation for the heart to be also more present during our time together, with also its own intuitive knowing, particular knowing that the mind sometimes cannot fully understand, but it can be really like even like knowing things faster and quicker and sometimes more accurately than our minds. So I invite you in summary to a more integral listening that we are sometimes use in academia, in talks, so that you can not only hear and be receptive to my words, to what I've been talking to you, but also to your own personal resonances in all these different centers. See if you can also stay a bit aware of your body and all of who you are as we go ahead into a more mental level, but that is also participating from other dimensions of our being. So simply take a few more moments and breathe. And whenever you feel ready, you can take a deep breath through your nostrils, deep down into the vital center, into the vital core. And then exhale all the air through your mouth, slowly letting go of any potential tension, of anything that doesn't belong to this moment. And whenever you feel ready, you can open your eyes and presence yourself as fully as possible through this cyberspace that we are when I be relating with each other. So this is like an introduction to participatory spirituality. I'm mindful that you have been doing some readings already, so I'm going to go, it's going to be brief, and because I really want to make sure we leave time for our questions and answers, our dialogue, that is always where things becoming more interesting as I will be engaging your particular interest. So this is like already Gabriel referred to these two waves of transpersonal psychology. And this is a way to understand these two waves, like simplified, of course, like a first wave in which there was like this kind of, you already studied the origin of transpersonal psychology, this confluence between like Eastern teachers coming from Asia, from India, Western psychology in particular, depth psychology, humanistic psychology, and also the countercultural movement of the 60s in the States with the psychedelic awakening. So there was like this East-West synthesis, this kind of like optimism about really understanding spirituality, these like maps of everything, and also a lot of metaphysical models and assumptions, and this emphasis on transcendence, no, a state of consciousness that are transcending our normal biographical identity. And the second wave, it's important to understand it. I understand it in a way as not a substitute, but like as an expansion. And this is why these two concentric circles is not a rejection of the first wave. There is still a lot of interest in the state of consciousness. There's some questioning of some of the metaphysical models or like perennialism. I believe you already had like some modules on that. But in addition to that East-West synthesis, there was also like a more North-South integration. There was a greater integration of like also indigenous cultures, like earth-based spiritualities, and what I call the North, that is emerging modern, postmodern, meta-modern spiritualities, and much more emphasis in the spiritual pluralism, in multiculturalism, diversity, more attention to gender, to ecological awareness, to all these things that are like so important for us in our times. And also, in contrast to that metaphysical emphasis of the first wave, also there was like a more emphasis on empirical research, even though still there is like a long way to go. And you know, people like Harris Friedman and Glenn Hartelius have done a lot for that. So this is like another way to understand these two waves. The first wave is the emphasis on transformation through states of consciousness, accessing the subtle of transcendent dimensions of a supposedly universal spiritual reality. And the second wave, that we can call more participatory, it expands, it questions some of these kind of assumptions about a single universal spiritual reality. But in addition to those states of consciousness, also there is an emphasis on transformation through an embodied engagement in a diverse and a multidimensional world, multiverse. These are like three dimensions of participatory spirituality you have read about already. And the first is an embodiment, and it speaks about personal co-creation, the idea that the spirituality is co-created with all of who we are. We don't leave anything behind. We don't leave the body and sexuality behind, like in some historical contemplative traditions, for example. And the second is relationality and diversity, interpersonal co-creation, the idea that we are always kind of interacting, they're always relating to something in our spiritual path. We'll elaborate around that as well. And the last one is what I call enactive pluralism, and I will explain what enaction means too. And it's our transpersonal co-creation, the idea that we're also like co-creating with that kind of like creative mystery going through us, through the whole creation, through the whole cosmos, through the whole life. And that's also something that we can also engage in our work. This is like a map of participatory spirituality. I believe you have like read that article on. So I'm not going in depth here. I just want to draw your attention about this principle, the idea that in transpersonal co-creation, the principle of equiplurality is like there could be different but equally emancipatory visions, spiritual visions and spiritual practices. And excuse me. And then some of these challenges of the objectivist spiritualities, in which there is this one single or universalist, one single spiritual worldview that all spiritualities somehow need to fit in. We'll look at that too. I'm not going to great depth here because we have a lot to cover, but interpersonal co-creation, the principle here is that we are all teachers and students, that all of you can teach me something important, I'm sure, and have maybe something to teach each of you, even if it's something very small. But I do want to talk very briefly about this, this potential tension. One of the antidotes for the transpersonal co-creation to this disempowerment or indoctrination that many people went through in spirituality and religion is what I call not only the right to inquire, but also heretical courage. The courage to question, the courage to question receive teachings, even participatory ones. So I always welcome criticism and questioning. And this can be in tension with, one of the challenges in the interpersonal co-creation is spiritual inflation, right? So how do we know when we are getting inflated spiritually or when we are being heretically bold? And this could be like a tension. I just want to say, like, if what you believe, if what you feel is true, it goes against what you have been taught, I would say speak your truth, live your truth, and life is going to tell you sooner or later if you are right or wrong. But if you are right, you will be opening like perhaps new paths for that creative unfolding of the mystery through humanity and through your personhood in that particular way. And the final is the interpersonal co-creation, and intrapersonal co-creation. I'll not go into depth here, but the idea of this principle is that all of the human attributes, our body, our instinct, our vital energy, our heart, our conscience and mind are equal members of a team, are like they have the same value in spirituality. They all have something fundamental to offer versus just an spirituality, as you will see, that prioritizes certain center over others. So I'm going to talk first about embodied spirituality briefly, and then relatedness, and then enactive pluralism. These are some features of embodied spirituality. I will not read them because we'll go one by one. And the first is this idea of the body as a microcosm of the larger cosmos and the creative mystery, as above, so below. We have like, even though, as you know, I'm not very a good friend of like naive equivalences in the spiritual traditions, or naive or forced universalism. This is a teaching that you find really in like almost all the spiritual traditions, from the esoteric traditions in the West to mystical Christianity, Taoist traditions, indigenous traditions. And interestingly, it's a teaching that is somehow corroborated by modern cosmology and science. The idea that like all the elements that compose the human body, 97% of them, like they were born in like in the middle of the explosion of nova stars in the middle of the Milky Way. And the atoms of hydrogen actually at the beginning of the very Big Bang. This is why the cosmologist Carl Sagan famously say that we're made of the star stuff. We're a way for the cosmos to know itself. But I would say we're not just stardust. Atoms don't age. So the very same atoms of hydrogen that were in the Big Bang are around us and are in our bodies. So the human body, I would say, is a bridge to cosmic remembrance, to cosmic consciousness. This is not about anthropocentralizing the cosmos, as the people did, and Leonardo da Vinci and others at the very beginning, but it's about cosmologizing the human. Excuse me. These are two citations that speak very much to this teaching, like the first of Pierre Teilhard de Chardin, the Jesuit mystic. My body is not a part of the universe as I possess in its totality. It is the totality of the universe possessed by me in part. I will send this PDF because this is the kind of sentence that is good to meditate. It's like a koan in some ways. And the other is from the East, Gautama the Buddha, with this long body lies the wholeness of life. You could say lies the wholeness of the cosmos as well. So the second feature is like this kind of like a full chakra spirituality. And I emphasize this because those of you who have studied historical traditions, you can really recognize probably that many of them like really focus on developing like what I call a heart chakra up spirituality, like more focused on developing the more subtle dimensions of the heart, like compassion, equanimity, agape, love, care, and also states of consciousness. But very often it will marginalize or subjugate or repress or even demonize like the body and sexuality and the instincts. And we could discuss, there could be having evolutionary reasons for that in certain historical moments. But today I believe that we are ready to live a more fully embodied spirituality and fully embodied spiritual life. And this is super important practically as well, because when you don't develop, like when you don't try or aspire to develop at all these levels, problems arises. We know about the Me Too movement, but I don't know if you have heard in the States about the Me Too guru movement, wherever it is in yoga or Kundalini yoga or Tibetan Buddhism or Shipibo ayahuasca communities. there is a lot of teachers and even teachers who are supposedly enlightened in their consciousness, but they are in other levels, like Ken Wilber has argued quite well, that they could be undeveloped, or their sexuality or the interpersonal or their emotional, they could be undeveloped and alienated and leading to some of these problems, even though, of course, each case needs to see seen in context and on an independent, individual basis. This is why I propose this vow of the integral bodhisattva. I apologize in Spanish, but this is the vow of the conscious mind renouncing its full liberation until the body, the heart, and the instinctive world have also achieved such a liberation to avoid those problems. Another feature is somatic awakening, and by that I did bodyfulness and distinguish bodyfulness from mindfulness of the body. Mindfulness of the body is like the awareness from head, like more frontal attention into the body. But bodyfulness is kind of the kind of awareness that can emerge from the body, that can be awakened from the body. I mean, perhaps many of you, when you do Tai Chi or even dance, or even like around sexuality, you have experienced that awareness emerging from the body. I always put the image of the great cats of the jungle who apparently without any intentionality are extremely aware, their whole body is fully aware. I believe it's like a feature that all mammals, at least, and perhaps all sentient beings, is our birthright. But here in the modern West, in particular, with the emphasis on cortical development, on cognitive cognizantrism, and it has been somehow repressed. And I believe it's super important to reawaken that bodyfulness for a fully embodied spiritual life. It's when the body is fully awake, it's more porous and more open for the energy of consciousness, the energy of life to flow through it more freely and to be integrated at our different dimensions. Also, the importance of rootedness, to be rooted in the body, so that when we go into self-consciousness, wherever it is with holotropic breathwork or meditation or with teacher plants, there is much less risk of getting lost or getting confused when we're really rooted in our bodies. It's like these kind of plants in nature, no? The deepest the roots, once they bloom in the spring, the more they can resist also like winds and the temporal and the storms and so forth. So that's also important, because those vital seeds that we can really grow in our spiritual life, they're really deeply rooted in the body. They're more likely to remain even when there is challenges in our lives. This is some of the practices that I know Gabriel told me you have also some of you at least reading some of the articles by Ramon Albareda and Marina Romero. And this is a word that emerges from their work on holistic integration, holistic transformation, although I've been given them like my own articulation and in my workshops. And this is like a practice about feet and legs. I would like emphasizing that deep rooting. That's important before we make contact with the vital center, for example. So this is like a word in which it's kind of relational, it's embodied, it's also creative in so many ways. It embodies like these features of participatory spirituality in a beautiful way. And it's also a word in which we not only not meditate just by ourselves, we meditate in contact with other people, but also putting in contact our different chakras in different ways. This is also meditation in contact with the heart chakra that we also use. And this is a little video from a workshop, I think a couple of years ago in Ibiza. And you can see there is one person relaxing the head, and another person is doing the work in the feet and the legs. This is a practice that helps the experience that I call embodied transcendence, in the sense like the contact with the head is relaxing the mind to open the mind into consciousness, into fields of consciousness, consciousness with capital letter, while there is like this grounding in the body, So it normally leads to these experiences of what I call embodied transcendence. But there are many, many other practices. And of course, in the workshops, there is a lot of embodiment and dance and games. as well as like creative art, because the artistic is always like the bridge between experiential knowledge and more kind of the knowledge that kind of one articulate like more verbally, more cognitively as well. I'm going to move to a relational dimension of spirituality, and in particular emphasis on diversity. But before I go to diversity, I want just to note that I will not go through this list, but I'll just go one by one for the sake of time. I will just note that most, if not all, developmental lines are relational. Try to think about a developmental line that is not relational, from psychosexuality. All those kind of like qualities that we understand that to be spiritual, like compassion, like skillful means in a teacher, like altruism, they simply cannot develop without relationship with others. And I'm thinking also here, like the work that Gabriel, your host and mentor in this cohort, did on transpersonal psychology and relationship with the other. Probably you have already read his work, his dissertation and his article, but he's also emphasizing that particular point. Sometimes when I presented this idea, some people say, hey, what about the hermit in the cave, Isn't the hermit in the cave in isolation, And I would say, I would strongly argue that he's not, because he's still in contact with the soil, he's in contact with the water, he's in contact with the worms, and very likely in contact with like subtle energies and perhaps even subtle entities that, whose ontological status we can discuss if you wish. But he's always, even the hermit in the cave, I would say that he's in a path of relational spirituality, although not perhaps with other human beings. And of course, this also expands like the spiritual, the arena for spiritual practice, to all sorts of relationships, from community to parenting, to intimate relationships, to sexuality, and so forth. And also it expands this, and it brings like this kind of social dimension, not because to be social is to be in relationship. So in participatory spirituality also embraces and is like a strong ally to engage forms of spirituality. I have here some of my personal heroes, but you may have many others that could be here as well. Jonah Macy, Vandana Shiva, Michael Lerner, Cornel West, and also like forms of like subtle activism, global meditations, and so forth. This is a practice that is actually quite new. For example, developed by David Nicol, graduate from CIS, one of my ex-students, in which he organizes meditations around the globe, like India, in England, the States, people meditating at the same times to try to impact political events, for example. And also the embracing of diversity impacts our own field, right? Because our field, you probably have gathered from your readings, and has been, mostly dominated by male authors, male white authors. And this is not just a problem of transpersonal psychology, it's a problem from academia in general that has been transforming tremendously in the last decades. So I always try to bring this to honor also like the many powerful female and feminist authors. And I know you have a module on feminist perspectives that you're going to be covering. You have already covered, so I'll not go into them, but you have here Christine Brooks that you have covered, Rosemary Anderson, Kaisa Pohaka, Jenny Wade, Frances Vaughan, Mariana Kaplan, many important authors. And also the diversity expanding beyond the white Anglo-American Anglophone transpersonalism, What about if we integrate Malidoma Some and like a Dagora tradition from Africa, Russian transpersonalism, Native American spirituality, Yasuo Yuasa, from Japan, Grosian Saldua has like a model of spiritual development that still needs to be put into dialogue with transpersonal models in the West. Eduardo Viveiros de Castro emphasizing Amerindian spirituality of the Amazons and articulating like a new animism that also needs to be in conversation. I believe the incorporation of all these perspectives, and not only these perspectives, but also perspectives of marginal minorities, like neurodiverse minorities, transgender people, polyamorous people, pagan, gay, lesbian, and so forth. there is a tremendous amount of literature, and there is a lot of very interesting insights about the spirituality that all these minorities and populations can bring. So I think that's what we need to be in whatever is the third wave for transpersonal psychology, like embracing a greater diversity and a more global transpersonal psychology. I'm gonna go for the last part about creative spirituality and active pluralism, and I would like to talk briefly about enaction. Enaction is embodied cognition. Is the idea that, of course, as we know in modern neuroscience, the brain is embedded in the body, but the body is embedded in an environment, and is at the interface of cognition, of embodiment, and the world where our at the interface for our brains, our minds, the body and the world, that cognition, as we understand it, takes place. And this is very interesting because we have from neuroscience a lot of insights today, like the brain, we know, is like a filter. There's so much out there, and the thalamus is filtering only the information that we need for survival. And at the same time, there is the filtering of information, and there is the constructive dimension of the mind, top down. Like this is why, like neuroscientists like Anil Seth is saying normal ordinary perception is control hallucination, for example, because he emphasized the top down. So I believe it's that filter theory and this kind of top down constructive dimension that and with an action that can start helping us to really understand how we know things. And this is some examples, this is a sponge in contact with the human skin makes emerge the quality of softness. But if an ant goes over a sponge, for an ant, the sponge is completely hard. So the qualities of the sponge are different depending on the different perceptual, cognitive, embodied systems that engage the sponge. It's another example, like sugar molecule for some kind of like microorganism, mortal bacteria, for example, becomes a slide. It's like a place that allows them to move in the microorganism world. But for other larger microorganisms, like it becomes food. It becomes something entirely different as well. Thich Nhat Hanh has a very poetic, beautiful way to speak about this. Not only he's saying that in an orange, in a mandarin, everything is there, like the sun, the rain, all the elements, but he also emphasizes that those flavors that we humans, they say, are distinctive of the mandarin, like the acidity, for example, it's citric acidity, are something that also emerges only in contact with our, our tongue, our like papillas gustativas in Spanish. It's escaping to me in English, like those parts of our tongue that allow us to feel different flavors. Maybe I think Gavi can help here. And this is Thich Nhat Hanh poetically speaking about that. To be is to interbe. This is how what Thich Nhat Hanh takes the Buddhist, the codependent horizon, right? You cannot be just by yourself alone. You have to interbe with every other thing. I also remember here the great master Dogen, the founder of the Soto Zen tradition in Japan, who said enlightenment is intimacy with all beings, also emphasizing the relational dimension of spirituality. I'm going to go to spiritual pluralism, and has been considered always a problem because it has been always seen as a cause of conflict. Of course, even today, even there is many often political, it's easier to kill your neighbor when you think God is on your side and not on the side of your neighbor. And we're seeing some examples of this very dramatically in our times today. But also from another perspective, like there is this worry that if there is so many claims to ultimate truth, like then perhaps none is right. Perhaps like modern and postmodern thinkers are right, and religion, there is no cognitive epistemic status. It's just simply like cuisine dishes, like art and sculptures, defined, perhaps even transforming, but without any kind of epistemic or ontological status. In response to this scandal of spiritual plurality, there were many kind of like attempts to kind of like respond to this, but all attempts that are kind of universalistic, kind of objectivistic accounts. One is what is called mystical ecumenism. You probably have heard these metaphors. Different religions have different paths, but that they all lead to the same peak of the mountain, or different rivers leading to the same ocean. But whenever they describe that peak, the qualities of that peak or that ocean, the proponents of this solution, they start describing in terms of one or another tradition, normally the ones that they prefer. So we go back to exclusivism and sectarianism. And this is another type that also was very influential in transpersonal psychology, like through Kirsten Smith, influenced Ken Wilber, but also Stanislav Grof. And also the idea that in the exoteric, more public or superficial or dimension, traditions differ. But if you go to the esoteric, the mystical core, they start becoming somewhat closer. And there could be some truth about that. There could be some qualities about that. There could be some truth. But those of us, and especially scholars in the comparative religion and comparative mysticism, that they really take the effort to study the traditions, the esoteric mystical traditions at depth, they realize that even in the mystical and the esoteric, the diversity is tremendous. So these are different kind of some ultimate visions, some traditions like how different from like emptiness in some Zen traditions is from the Black Hole vision above, or also the Merkaba in Merkaba Judaism mystical, the Ezekiel chariot was considered the ultimate vision there, the tree of life and so forth. Tremendous diversity as well, even though there could be some features that we could see that might overlap, as we will see. Another is like the idea that like a spiritual reality, again, is something that is more objective somehow, and but different traditions are just touching a part of it, or a snapshot, a different perspective. So this is like the typical metaphor of the elephant and the blind man that you have like in Hinduism and also in Sufism, I think, as well. So the different talks, different parts, and but of course, this vision projects into spiritual reality, this objectivism that even today is considered naive by most philosophers of science and even many scientists and neuroscientists in particular about our natural world. And of course, there is always some traditions or some people that they would claim that have like a whole vision of the elephant or greater parts of the vision. Essentially, this universalist, the idea that we can isolate somehow one quality, this is one example that was a candidate in the debate in comparative mysticism by Robert Foreman and collaborators, pure consciousness. Pure consciousness definitively can find across many traditions, but it's not the goal of many. For some of them, it is the ultimate goal, but for others, it's not. For example, in Samkhya Yoga, the idea of disentifying yourself from everybody, everything that is not pure witness consciousness, that's considered liberation. But pure consciousness, for example, in the prevalent trends of the mystical Christian traditions, is not considered the ultimate. It's considered an encounter with the human soul that is considered a preparation, a preparative step towards like a communion or like an encounter with a personal God that is loving and all-knowing and so forth. And the final is hierarchical universalism. There has been a tremendous variety of hierarchies. I'll just go through them very quickly for the sake of time. But just pay attention how always these hierarchies, the person who presents the hierarchy, the author, the teacher, the mystic even presents his tradition as the top in the hierarchy, like in this case, is Shingon Buddhism, Hokai, and then ranks all the other traditions like as lower steps, or even some of them as completely false. This is another. There is in Hinduism there is like dozens of these kind of hierarchies, and of course, people are ranking differently depending according to their preferences. And this is modern Christian hierarchies. There, of course, things are around. Theistic mysticism is at the top, monistic is lower level, and this completely contrast, for example, with Ken Wilber, right? Ken Wilber would put theistic traditions in a lower level than the monistic and non-dual traditions. So you can start seeing the problem here. Grof also has its own hierarchy, although Grof is much more relaxed about that. and also his a little bit where is much more, it fosters a more organic spiritual development. So what's underlying all this is what I call a spiritual narcissism, the belief that the universal superiority of our own favorite tradition. And it's important to realize that we all can fall on that. Should I have fallen on that at times? Maybe I'm still falling. And someone like the Dalai Lama, who is like probably a paragon of spiritual humility and probably one of the less narcissistic persons in the world. Someone like him still believes that not only Tibetan Buddhists, but his Gelugpa school of Tibetan Buddhists has an understanding of emptiness, of sunyata, that is superior to other schools in Buddhism and in Tibetan Buddhism. And he does believe that everybody, all human beings, at some point through different reincarnations, will accept that truth. So anyway, I'm just saying this not to critique the Dalai Lama, that I really like very much, just so that we can also be more relaxed if we identify in ourselves these tendencies. They are very, very human to consider superior what has worked for us. But that's why it's important, the importance of interreligious dialogue, of this kind of dialogues that we are having also in this cohort, in this degree, and so forth. So the point here is when we have like in the year 2002, like 9,900 distinct religions in the world. By the year 2020, probably 23,000 religions, with 2 religions appearing a day. So in the field of comparative mysticism and other fields, the understanding has shifted. Is perhaps there is not just one mountain, different pathways to one peak. Perhaps it's like here in nature, like in our world, different mountains, different peaks, and also we can have different oceans and so forth. This is like an Arborean, a tree-inspired model of spiritual diversity. And this is part because a lot of my work is also very biomimetic. I like to ground spirituality in life in so many ways. And I find this image is very helpful for that world. It's like our genealogical family tree as well, right? If you look at your family tree, you will see like expanding different branches, different directions, And the idea is that each tradition is like kind of like, even though some of the branches can overlap, it's kind of moving into a different ontological, soteriological direction, like enacting a different solution for the problems of human alienation and human suffering and human selfishness. And of course, like in our families, I would say that probably all of you would agree that a healthy family is not trying to impose, on the sons and daughters, to become doctors or lawyers or to become, you have to become like a Mormon or like a Buddhist, but it's like a platform for the spiritual individuation of its members. And that's my bet. That's what I'm trying to bring into the conversation. As I mentioned too, the 3 branches can overlap, so some traditions can share some qualities. This is a view of spirituality that's called like family resemblance. These are some examples: mystical traditions, shamanic traditions, some features of them. And as you can probably recognize, some mystical traditions share some of these features, but not all share them all. The same with shamanic traditions. So this is like a more nuanced understanding of similarities and differences when we start really looking at mystical and indigenous traditions in a kind of like global context. Also bring the tree of life also as a way to bring this Arborean model. And also, here we are again. This is like an evolutionary tree of religion and myth. So you can see, you can start to see the complexity of the different branches of the different religious traditions in the world. But this is still an simplification. This one is a much more complete one, and probably still is lacking of many nuances. Each one of those threads is a religious traditions, and of course, many of these threads it opens up into a greater diversity. This is just Buddhist tradition opening in the left side, Buddhist traditions opening into all these different vehicles, and then on the right is just the Tibetan schools also branching out into many other sub-schools, many of which, as I mentioned before with the example of the Dalai Lama, are at odds with each other. They don't agree about fundamental matters like the nature of ultimate reality, for example. So I emphasize in my work this idea of a spiritual individuation, that we can really embody the very unique embodiments of life, of the cosmos, of the creative mystery, and we can develop our unique spiritual identity in interaction with all of who we are, other sentient beings, and that creative mystery. And that doesn't mean that each of us are developing our own unique religion or something like this. It means simply that we don't need to like mimic what others have been doing, even though they can serve as great reference for us, like mentors or traditions and so forth. I like this quotation from Antonio Machado, traveler, there is no path, the path must be forced as you walk. This is a Spanish poet, and this is some images of that kind of walking the path, line the path as we walk. And this is very important, as you read in some of the articles. This is not a relativistic vision. Ken Wilber and some like perennialist authors always kind of pigeonhole the participatory approach as being postmodern, relativistic, but it's not. The difference is that the hierarchies are not created according to ontological or doctrinal standards, like saying, for example, non-duality is best, or theism or personal God is best. But our practical matters, what traditions, what teachings help us to free better ourselves from narcissism, selfishness, what traditions are helping us to be more integrated as human beings, to avoid dissociations, as we mentioned before, that can happen with heart chakra spiritualities. What traditions also help us today to bring that more balance in our kind of like ecological crisis, our kind of unjust socioeconomical justice, gender equality, and so forth. And of course, many of these are very modern values. So this is something that is very clear to me. This is just a proposal from which I stand to dialogue with other people, also from other cultures around these matters. But what about spiritual unity? With this, I'm finishing, I'm aware of the time. What about spiritual unity? I bring this quotation from the great mystic and poet Rumi. Maybe you are searching among the branches for what can only appear in the roots. And the quotation is, was often a different context, but I would say that what are the roots of the trees? We have been seeing all these arboreal metaphors. So what are the roots, I would say the roots is that creative mystery that I call, that energy of life, that energy that I would say that is the same. I don't know if even calling it an energy is right. I would say this creative process, or this creative energy, however you want to call it, all words, human words can fall short to describe it accurately. And but is that unfolding, that creative unfolding, that from the Big Bang and probably before, like like from atoms of hydrogen and some gas, develops like the stars and the planetary systems, and then the chemical and biological life and cultural life, and now the future we see what it's like still for us, some of us to see, like what is waiting for us. And this is like one of my colleagues at CIS, the great cosmologist Brian Swain, saying this is the greatest discovery of the scientific enterprise. You take hydrogen gas and you leave it alone for a long time, and it turns into rose bushes, giraffes and humans. That's what I call the mystery. That whatever is that energy or process that brings that creativity into place, and we're participatory actors in this kind of cosmic drama. I think we have of course, our personal and human dramas here on Earth, and I would argue that our human dramas, our personal dramas, are also part of that kind of creative unfolding of this mystery. Also, we know that before the Big Bang, it's likely that there could have been other universes, or maybe also what is now called kind of like dark energy. There is some understandings, although there is a lot of alternative theories too, and many of them are very contended today. But some years ago, it was like, well, there was like all this dark energy that we don't know what it is, that perhaps was before that Big Bang, and that explains that residual dark energy in our universe. But whatever that dark energy is, whatever was happening before the Big Bang, there is another model about like kind of endless creation. Like there is one universe after our new universes. There are many models. But I just want to end my talk with reminding us about like this great blow to human with the Hubble telescope and other big telescopes. We thought we had kind of really mapped, you know, like a big chunk of the universe, at least a huge chunk of the universe. Then we realized that the only thing that we were like mapping out is a 4% of the universe, like 22% it was dark matter that we didn't have no idea what it was, and 74% was dark energy that we still have no clue about what it is, you know. So this is why I want to end this talk with like a call for this kind of like humility about not knowing. Like there is also this great Tibetan teacher whose mantra was offering to students is like not knowing, like to really waking up different forms of like more intuitive knowledge beyond the rational and the logical. But I want to close with this sentence from it's a group, it's a music group, it's called Spiritualize, and there was like this meme that went viral in the internet number of years ago. And the meme was something like this, like, ladies and gentlemen, we're floating in space. Nobody knows what the heck is going on. I love you. And I believe this is a very important meme because, you know, it speaks also that that sense of not knowing, that sense of uncertainty doesn't have to lead to nihilism, to cynicism, to competition, to doesn't need to lead to angst or existential angst. We must need today in our times. So I'm gonna finish my talk here, and I will stop sharing the screen so we can move into our time for dialogue and questions and answers.
Thank you very much, Jorge, for this. Yeah, you have covered so much in such a short time, and you have given us a lot of ideas to think about. And now we have 35 minutes to share, to ask you questions. So I suggest you, whether you type your questions in the chat or you just raise your hand digitally with the corresponding function in the Zoom environment, and I will just sequence who's first and who's second, and so yeah, we're waiting for your questions now. Who wants to start?
Lana.
Who breaks the ice? Yes.
Yes, thank you so much for this wonderful presentation, Jorge. You mentioned at one point that it is time for us to ground in our body, in our spiritual development or spiritual embodiment. When you mention that, does that mean that there is some kind of evolution of humanity, and at this time we are going through spiritual embodiment? And if there is an evolution, where are we moving to?
Let me back up to your question. You were asking about like this sense of embodiment, this proposal for embodiment, if there was an evolutionary sense to it. That was the question, or could you qualify? Could you repeat so I'm fully clear, because I was interrupted? So apologies.
Yes, you absolutely got the right thing. Is this an evolutionary element to this?
Okay.
And if there is, do you believe in human evolution? And if there is, where are we moving to?
Okay, wonderful. Okay. As I mentioned before, with like that, like a metaphor of bodyfulness and the cats, I do have the sense, I do believe, and this is something I believe you also have been reading in the work with Michael Wasburn in one of your modules, you know. I do believe that there was something as mammals, as humans, as animal species, you know, there were times that we were much more fully aware of our bodies. There were most bodyfulness. You still find that in many kind of indigenous traditions, in which there is people who live in the jungle, who are in contact with nature. There is an awakening in their bodies that you rarely find in the big cities like New York or Barcelona, in which like people are more in their heads. there were some experiments, phenomenological experiments, like sending cues, signs to randomly to many people, and then when they would receive the sign, they would need to report where was the site of their consciousness, and invariably was in the head. It was like a beautiful research published in the form of a book called The Mindless Body, I believe, or something like that. In any case, so I think like with the emphasis on cognizantrism, I always make this example in the kindergarten. I don't know how it was in your country. Kindergarten was a very integral learning. We dance, we play, we learn many things in unembodied ways. But as soon as we move into the school system and then into university level, all the teachings, all the learnings are more mental and cognitive. So therefore, we start kind of dissociating more from the body and its sources of knowledge, the knowledge of the heart and the knowledge of the instinct and the body. I believe that in our contemporary times, things are changing in a very speedy way. There is classes for emotional intelligence in the school for children, meditations and mindfulness is being included, all these things are really important steps in that direction. But still we have a long way to go because we have like centuries, probably even millennia of years of dissociation, of the mind-body dissociation, there is some, it's very likely that, Descartes, this distinction, this dualism of mind-body that he brought forward, it was already a base of an experience of his own disembodiment. There's like a bit the flight to objectivity explaining this quite eloquently. So I would say that yes, there could be an evolutionary movement about recovering all these things we have lost with this overemphasis in cognicentric cortical cognition, while not losing our critical capabilities of discernment that development has helped us to achieve. So it's not a return, to the past, but an integration. I would say that's like an evolutionary, but the term evolution is a very contested one as well. So we're not going to get here into those debates. But where all this is hitting, I don't know. I don't know. I would say with my visionary hat on, if all goes well, if we don't fuck it up, if we don't destroy Earth, it will become a more enlightened society. If I would say that it feels to me that it's going to a greater integration of consciousness and matter and energy in this level of reality. So that this level of reality is also like kind of like has qualities that perhaps only exist now in the more subtle levels of reality integrated in matter. But that's a wild bet, as wild as many other bets any of you can offer today here. But thank you for the great question. I hope my answer was a bit helpful. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Jorge. And I would like to add that we're launching a certificate program in February, led by Glenn Hertilius, which is about this bodyfulness. It's about like a different, very useful techniques just to be aware if you are mostly in your head, in your chest, and how to balance that and how to integrate that with some practical techniques. I know you know Glenn's work, right? Jorge, yeah.
Yes, Glenn's work, I highly recommend his work. Glenn and I worked together at CIS for years, and I've seen him also in action with his attention strategies. I think it's really like a way to move towards this bodyfulness. Really beautiful. Thanks for supporting him, Gabby.
Yeah. Next in the lane is Rainbow. Rainbow, are you there?
I'm here.
Yeah. Okay.
Hi, everyone. Hello, Jorge. So, such an honor to be with you in person and have you with your mother and in your humanity.
I'm looking for you because there's so many screens.
Oh, my camera isn't very good. It's very blurry.
Okay. I'm looking for you. I cannot find you at the moment, but that's okay.
Okay.
Okay,
So,
yes, I see you now. Rainbow, I see you. Great.
yeah. So, my question is in two parts. So, the first really is about advice. So, I'm hoping to embark on a PhD journey next year, and I have aspirations to map or model the transpersonal dimensions or aspects of motherhood. And so I'm thinking to conduct a grounded theory with some phenomenological approach in there. So I wanted to know what advice you would give me as a novice model maker, looking to fill this big gap about motherhood and the consciousness of motherhood, the journey of the woman through motherhood, and then this embodiment of the child within her body, the father's DNA. Is so complex. There's so many layers of this. And this is participatory spirituality in its most embodied, I feel, this journey of becoming a mother. And then the second part of my question is more of interest. So obviously, this idea of, it's interesting to think about a child's soul and the antiquity of that soul, and then where it fuses within the child's body, and then within the matrix of the mother's soul and the mother's body. So I'm just wondering what you think about the mechanics of that, or what you, if you've even thought about it. Thank you.
The last for Samson, the last part of your second question is about the soul's child, and could you repeat that last part, please?
Yeah, so where do you think, or how do you think this child's soul exists within the mother's soul or the mother's body? Because the child's
the
body.
mother. Okay.
Yeah, so what do you think of that?
Okay. First, about your first question for interest, fantastic that you are focusing on motherhood. I think that's really beautiful. Completely embodied, completely participatory. There cannot be more participatory embodied journey than being a mother and giving birth, right? And spiritual and sacred. I mean, it's all together. Being a male who has never had the miracle of pregnancy and birth in my body, I think my advice comes from researcher. I would say that you are in a good place in the sense that you're using grounded theory. So obviously, what you need to get is as many experiential accounts from women who go through that journey. And I think the choice of your method was right on, because if you started studying that from more external objectives or less participatory ways, then you are missing the whole point. So I think your method is going to answer that question. You're going to be gathering experiences from all these journeys from motherhood, and your model is going to emerge from the experience. Yeah, allow your model. It's good to have different other models as you are studying, Wasborn, Wilber, all these things, in the back of your mind. But the importance is the experiences of the women. That's the guiding force. And then once your model is elaborated from experiential grounding, then you put it into dialogue with other models, but not before. Don't allow all these other theories to bias you, to create kind of blind spots. So that's what I can tell you as a researcher who has never been through a pregnancy and delivery. And the second question is fascinating. I've never thought about that, so I don't have a clear answer. I think that I would say that I don't know. There is a lot of hypotheses, of course, about even when, at what time in development of the fetus there could be an incarnation of what we call the soul, if there is such a thing. Of course, if we embrace that kind of spiritual view of incarnation, there is some theories about 48 days, when the pineal gland wakes up and the first DMT, and it coincides with also the Tibetan Book of the Dead, 48 days, the Bardos. Speculation, conjecture, nobody knows where, nobody knows. So I would say that it's a beautiful question for you as a researcher to keep alive within you, and maybe to ask your co-researchers, and see what they say what they feel, and then every now and then, go back to the question. It's like you have you plant a plant in your terrace, and you water it every now and then, you go and see what flowers are there, how it's blooming, how it's developing, Keep the question alive in you. There is no, I don't think there is any, I doubt that anyone on planet Earth could give you an answer to that question, but it's a beautiful, beautiful question. Thank you so much, Rainbow.
Thank you so much. Bless you, mother. Take care.
Okay. I think next question should come from the chat, from what I've seen in the history of the different interactions. And it's from Stephanie, and she says, Jorge, how can we use the participatory approach in practical ways within secondary and formal education, 11 to 18 years old, to address rising numbers of youth mental health issues and teenage suicide?
Wow, that's a great question. It's not something I have, as you know, Gabriel, it's not something I have personally developed, research, having any expertise. I would say that there is some people who have, for example, used some of these practices, emerging from the work of Ramon Alvareda, Marina Romero, that's central to the practical work I do. And I'm thinking about, in particular, about our colleague Gloria, who was a school teacher, and she has been applying this not only with the children in the school, but also with the teachers. So I would say, to Stephanie, that I don't know if she speaks Spanish, because Gloria doesn't speak English, but I would be happy to put them in contact with each other, because she will need to talk with practitioners who have been doing that. I mean, I would say definitively that something about that kind of more integral education that we had in the kindergarten should still be part of our adult education. Why do we stop playing? When we know that when we have fun is when we learn better. So what about including more games to learn, What about including embodiment? For example, I'll tell you, when I did a lot of experiments, but with more adults, but some of them could be helpful. For example, in my classes, sometimes when we're discussing a topic, instead of everybody sitting on the chairs, in a circle, and their bodies immobile, I would bring a ball. I would say this is like a magic ball. And I will invite everybody to move around the room. And I will let this game, only the person who has the ball can speak, but you can throw the ball to someone else to follow the dialogue, the conversation. Someone can ask for the ball. So it was very interesting, because what people noticed is that as people were moving around the room versus being immobile, they were feeling their views and their mental views more flexible, more kind of open minds, and they would change their minds more easily. Sometimes they would admit errors more, so things like that. I did a lot of experimentations, also with masks, like playing characters, in discussions and dialogues, but for those populations of 11 to 18, have not worked directly with them. So maybe we can find a way to, maybe through Francesca, who I believe is here as well and works for Alef Trust. And Francesca also is very in connection with that body of work, and maybe some bridge can be made, so that some people like Gloria and other teachers who have been I see Francesca here coming into the interview. So maybe you can help with that bridge and maybe some translation. I think that would be wonderful. Thank you so much. Was it Stephanie?
Stephanie, yeah.
Great.
Okay.
Thanks so much. Thank you.
And next we have Nicole. Nicole's talking.
Hi there.
Oh, yes.
One quick question for you. I know in your work you talk a lot about making this shift from moving away from the idea of seeking transcendence as the ultimate goal. But you mentioned also, when you were talking about some of the workshops that you've done, this idea of embodied transcendence. So I'm just curious if you could share a little bit more about if you could just say a little bit more about what that is, and then how, or if we should work towards embodied transcendence.
Yes. The contrast in the first slide, there was a way in which that first wave was so interested in a state of consciousness, in a way that was it became, you start looking at all the books of transpersonal psychology of the 70s and 80s, altered states of consciousness, non-ordinary states of consciousness. That was like the emphasis, like people were taking out of psychedelics, and I'm sure some of those people were also kind of embodying the realizations in their lives. Of course, I'm not saying that there was no transformation, but that was the emphasis. So yeah, in my work, it's like, okay, yes, we can really open our mind to, for example, like fields of consciousness that might transcend our own biographical everyday consciousness. I believe that in the same way that our heart also can participate of fields of love that are wider than our, that exist in life. For example, in the planet Earth, Gaia, in the planet Gaia, our consciousness can participate in fields of consciousness that kind of wider and expanded, and in a way they transcend our biographical consciousness. So in that way, they're transcendent to that, So the mind is very limited, life and consciousness, as far as we know, could be infinite. So they're transcending that, but not only, and this is important, I wouldn't say that not only consciousness is transcendent, I would say that life energy, that energy of life is also transcendent in the sense that it's kind of infinite. I mean, there is no other human being equal to any other, and it will never be, and it will never was. The same with all other species, and this is we're talking about real, actual infinity of potentiality of creativity. So in that way, it's transcendent to the mind. The word transcendent is using. In my work, I stopped using it. If you ever read Participation and the Mystery, I prefer now the word subtle to refer to this kind of more multidimensional reality. So. And then I keep the word immanent for spirit that is in the body, in matter, in sexuality, in nature, but the transcendent immanent dichotomy, I think it's kind of an old one that I think for me the term subtle makes a more like seamless reality, seamless world, because transcendent and immanent were like polar opposites, It was immanent or transcendent, A transcendent was even considered like a metaphysical plane of reality that was beyond, completely beyond time, space, completely beyond, not connected with this natural world. And I don't feel that way. I think that what we call the natural world can and should be expanded to include all those kind of like more subtle qualities and dimensions of life, of the cosmos and reality.
Okay, thank you. Then, or do you want to continue your question, Nicole? I assume that you did not open your microphone, so it's over, right? So then next is Pierre.
Hi, Jorge, and thank you so much for your presentation. I think the debates between all these perspectives is fascinating, and in particular, the debate between the perennialist view and the participatory view. I'm curious to know what you think about how this debate will evolve in the future. Do you see the transpersonal community converging towards the participatory view, or maybe there will always be debates, and that's kind of what is fascinating and has value?
That's a great question. Like there was a historical evolution. Historically, there was like a shift between this emphasis on perennialism. We have like Wilber and Grove, and even Wasburn was putting forward like a kind of universalist model. And although when he got engaged with my work, like he recognized, I really think this pluralist is more the way to go for the transpersonal movement and so forth. But so I would say that like now there is more predominance of this more pluralist participatory. It's not just my work. It's more like an ethos. It's more like a sensibility, as I put it in that paper. That's kind of like spreading in different ways, with the feminist sensibility, with ecological, with pluralism and so forth. I think the debate is still alive, and I have been away from the debate for the last few years because my work was going in different directions. But the debate is still alive with Steve Taylor and his soft perennialism, and Glenn Hartelius and Michael Daniels, and those three in particular I don't know if you're familiar with some of the writings. If you're interested, I will refer you to that kind of dialogue, and there's other players as well. So it's still ongoing, and I don't know, I believe that there is some way in which the tensions are softening. I would say like Tyler soft perennialism, as he put it, is softer than Ken Wilber's hierarchical, strict perennialism, you know. So I think, and in a way, with Taylor, we had some dialogue, he and I, and you know, I mentioned that I felt, and he's happy with that, like that his perennial is a participatory perennialism. So people are starting to speak about participatory perennialism, and probably about perennialist participation or participatory. So there is some. I think this is good. I think this is good. Like I would say, like personally speaking, you know, like situated in my own evolution as a thinker, probably like I went like very strongly in one pole, because I had something like Ken Wilber to deal with, you know. That was like a lot. So it's normal that you go into this other like more polar place to see more clearly the problems of that perspective. And I believe that like you know, contemporary authors and thinkers of the future, maybe like you, Pierre, you will write a dissertation that helps to build bridges and bring more balance in the discussion. With Steve Taylor, I still have some issues because his proposal is still privileging like immanent spiritualities over transcendental or ones like and it's still there's like a privilege of certain traditions upon others, but it still is so much softer than those like rigid hierarchies. So I believe there is an evolution in the dialogue, and recently Glenn Hartelius asked me to write at least a letter responding to the dialogue for the International Journal of Transpersonal Studies, because also Elias Capriles, another author, was critiquing some of things of the participatory approach. And I told him, oh, maybe, maybe. I think also, like, you know, frankly, like people who are participating in the dialogue, they are representing really amazingly the viewpoints. So when I feel I have something really significant to contribute, I'll speak up again. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Thank you.
Okay, the next one is Gabriela, who is in a sunny place. I guess it's far from Europe.
Yeah.
I'm in Denver, Colorado, and it's actually, you know, it was snowing last week, but the weather here is so bipolar. One day it's snowing and the next day it's sunny and warm. So I'm embracing this beautiful weather today. And my question is around your thoughts around sacred sexuality. What is your viewpoint on sex in the sense of our sexual energy being, when we have sex and orgasm, do you believe that our creative energy basically gets depleted? Because I've been hearing a lot that, you know, the act of sex, when two beings really are just doing it for the act of creation to create a new being, this is how it should, this is the beauty, this is the divine purpose of it. And when it's used in other ways for desire or for pleasure, it's actually taking away from our sexual energy, our primal vital life force energy. And I'm kind of like in this space where I'm trying to feel out what feels true to me about this topic, you know. So yeah, I'm wondering, what is your stance on this?
Wow, this is a great question, and it's a question I also have like deliver entire 1 hour talks on this topic, like maybe also because we only have like I believe like 5 minutes left. I'll just give you a few thoughts, but I think it's a great inquiry. You know, when I visit Father Bruno Barnhart, like a Benedictine monk in the monastery close to the Sagan Institute, and for me, this Bruno Barnhart was the closest I've seen to an apostle. It was like his 90s, an erudite, was channeling the Logos, and we had dialogues with him about sexuality. And he said, Jorge, I'm a celibate monk, but sexuality, I see sexuality as the fountainhood through which the divine creativity comes into the world. right? And I don't think he was only speaking about procreation. I think he was speaking about that real, genuine creativity that we can all channel, and if we understand sexuality as a creative, sacred energy, and then we can engage it like in ways that we can, of course, like engage to the miracle of creating another human life, and that's one of the greatest miracles of the use of this energy. But you can also like engage that energy to recreate, to regenerate yourself, to give birth to yourself. The second birth of many mystics is a birth. It's really created by this energy. It's not just consciousness. It's like a fully, well, if some of you have ever experienced like a death rebirth experience, it's like a full body experience. And also it's like, is the, you know, in that vital world, as Ramon Alvareda, my colleague, would say, it's like all those vital seeds of all your potentials are there. So it's the world, that sexual primary world from which all your capabilities and potentials emerge from that. They are vital seeds that need to be manifested. So that being said, I would say that it's very important to really reconnect our sexual behavior with the understanding of sexuality as life, but not to reduce it to the fact of procreation. To understand that that's a fountain of life, but not only just for procreation, but also for the creation of like truly like emancipatory projects in life, that help others, for our lives, for others, and so forth. So I mean, there is so much more. Of course, you talk also about orgasm, and with anything in life, there is different schools of thoughts about this. There is the school of thought like one taste, and some Tibetan Buddhists like orgasm is what you experience the Dharmakaya, it's like a spiritual experience in itself, and there's something there. Orgasms for some people is kind of the key to unlock the secrets of the universe. And for other people, like to have a sexuality that is transorgasmic, that contains energy and allows the energy to really flow through your entire body. It's also like a spiritual practice. And then when you allow that, if there is an orgasm, it's an orgasm that is fully embodied, and it's like a glass that you pour with water, and it kind of like overflows, but the cup of the water still is full, okay? Versus like a bathtub that you take the cup and all the water goes through the. So also I'm saying this because there's so many nuances here. I would say depends on the kind of orgasm that one has. Could be depleting, could be something that could lead you like in a debilitated state, especially more for men than for women. For many women, having orgasms could be like one after the other, and like exuberating and like crescendo of sensuality and even a spiritual opening. But for most men, goes down after an orgasm. But depending on the kind of orgasm, there is so much more we could talk here. Maybe we can organize if there is interest at some point. I talk about sexuality and spirituality. It's one of the topics I'm highly interested. So thank you for your question, and hopefully even these 5 minutes have given you some food for thought or something that is helpful for your inquiry.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, you all. We have arrived to the end of this guest webinar. And before concluding, I would like to emphasize that if you haven't yet signed for our community circle in Sutra in the community platform, please do so. And this is how you'll receive details of all upcoming guest webinars, which aren't part of your specific academic modules. And this is also where you will find all guest webinars recordings. So if you aren't able to access Sutra, please, you can contact Francesca Hector, our community coordinator, and she will add you. She will send you an invite to get into Sutra, and there you will find these guest webinars and many others. So thank you very much, Jorge, for all this time, for sharing your knowledge, your wisdom, and everything we have shared tonight. And for those who are taking the
Yes. Thank you for the invitation. Thank you for your attention, for the great questions. And this is where things become alive. So I really appreciated the questions. It was like really, really high level. I didn't have answers to all of them, as you could see, but thank you so much. I'm going to say goodbye because I need to get ready for something, but I'll leave you with Gabriel here.
Thank you, Jorge. Not every scholar allows to participate in such a big round of questions. So thank you very much for your humility and willing to give us. Thank you. And bye-bye to everybody. We continue seeing each other in the Transpersonal Psychology module. And for those who are not in that module, maybe in next guest webinars. So bye-bye. Thank you very much.